Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama, and I thank you for joining me for another episode. This week, my guest is Steffanie Housman. Steffanie is the Handmade Business Coach, and what she does is helps struggling women business owners create the creative and product-based businesses that they desire so that they or you can start making money online and at markets. I know earlier this year I've spoken one-on-one with some people, either through email or on social media or even on the phone for some people. And we've talked about what's going on with Etsy and just how to expand and grow our businesses. And that's why Steffanie is on the podcast. I'm hoping that with this episode, you will get some ideas about just how to grow your business and maybe see how Steffanie can be of help to you. So Steffanie, thank you so much for being my guest and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I also forgot to mention, you're right there in the trenches with us because you also run your own handmade company, Old Town Suds. So you know what it's like to run a creative business.
I do. It is actually going to be 7 years old in a few days. I just realized it's close to my anniversary of actually launching on Etsy.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So 7 years in the business, that's kind of encouraging because right now, especially in the Etsy ecosphere, things are changing and some of us are kind of on edge, just wondering when things will settle down. So before we get into that discussion, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and then we'll launch into what you do and how you help women business owners who are kind of struggling?
Definitely. So I started my creative business because I was home after having brain surgery. Quite frankly, I didn't know exactly what was going on with my body. It wasn't a tumor or anything like that. I legitimately have a big brain, and they had to make more space for it. Kind of a strange situation to be in. I had been married a year at the time of my surgery, so I was a newlywed still. And I had a full-time job in the as an association executive, and I was so stinking bored at home. I did not know what to do with myself, and the TV was boring after week one.
Yes.
And I needed a creative outlet. I had already made my holiday presents for the year, and this was in March. And I started making handmade cleaning products and realized in the area that I lived in the outskirts of Washington, D.C., someone should be selling this. So I started making my products. Everybody loved them. And then I carted them off literally in a wagon to my local farmer's market and I set up my first booth space there. My husband's a web designer, developer by trade. And so without his expertise, without his help, I launched my own Etsy store. And he eventually started critiquing me and helping me modify what I was doing to more of a, let's say, a acceptable standard in his book.
Yes.
Which is kind of funny. But it grew and grew to where I was actually focusing on the soap products because of what my customers were saying. They wanted bar soap. They wanted creative soap. And then I eventually learned how to niche myself off into beer and wine. So my focus nowadays is on beer and wine soap. I mostly sell to vineyards and breweries in our local area, but I do have customers, wholesale clients right now all over the United States. So much so that our soap was on display at the National Archives Museum and for sale there as well. So we've been wildly successful considering this was supposed to just be a creative project for me to recover from brain surgery.
Wow.
So many years later, the coaching, and this is a long-winded answer to your question.
No, go on.
The coaching aspect really started, I was kind of tinkering with the idea when a lot of the other market vendors were asking me how I became so successful with my products, how I sold what I was doing, how I found graphic designers for my product packaging, and all of these just questions that we generally have as makers. And I realized when my son was born, I really don't want to be spending every weekend out at markets. I want to just have a little bit more time with him. My focus on the soap company then dwindled down to where I was just wholesale or my really, really, really big shows throughout the year. And now I'm focusing on coaching and just helping people get to the level of success that I was at and maintaining that level of success.
Okay. So you really learned everything as you were going, and now you have documented what worked and what didn't work, and that's what you coach other creative entrepreneurs in.
Exactly. And I also have the experience of both of my parents are entrepreneurs. They both own their own businesses, and my grandparents as well. So I've been living this essentially entrepreneurial dream since day one.
Okay. Now, can I ask this? Because I know there are men who listen to this podcast. Will you only strictly work with women?
That's a great question. I will talk to some men. I think I connect better with women just as I understand the emotional aspects and I understand the mental struggles that we go through.
Yes.
Balancing work, life, babies, other commitments. And it's different as women. And that's just how we are wired. But I will work with certain men who I feel that I connect well with. I don't want to lead someone down a path that I just don't feel that connection with.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Now, the Handmade Business Coach, how did it, well, you've explained how it came to be, but what does the process of working with you look like if someone decides that they need outside help?
So what I encourage people to do is go to my website, which is SteffanieHousman.com, and click over to the Take Action page. And in that, it describes our customized program. And you fill out an application. I don't accept everybody, but I want to make sure someone's really committed and has the drive and wants to work with me so we can make their business exactly what they want it to be. Once they fill out the application, we get on a complimentary call and see if we work well together. Okay. I'm not the best coach for everybody, just as coach XYZ down the street isn't the best coach for everybody either. So we really just make sure that we have that connection and drive together. Okay.
And so when working with you specifically, what services will you offer your clients? Is it more talking through situations and issues, or do you have, what's the word? Like, do you have specific, is it more of a task-driven type of coaching where it's like, okay, today we're going to learn how to use XYZ to do ABC?
So it completely depends on the client. Okay. So some of my clients really work best with, today we're going to learn how to do XYZ. I was actually working with someone earlier this week. We set up MailChimp together. Okay. She just didn't feel comfortable doing it by herself. So we do a screen share and do it together. Okay. Versus others, it's, okay, here's our homework. Let's talk about this. I have this issue. How would you handle that? So it just kind of depends on the individual and the personality.
Okay. So you mentioned working with, like walking someone through how to do something like setting up MailChimp. Do you do different things? Like, say, if someone wants to know how to do Facebook ads to promote their Etsy shop, or learn how to use Pinterest to drive traffic to their shop, do you do those types of things, or something else? Does that question make sense?
It does. I typically, for especially Facebook ads, will make recommendations on other companies they could work with. Okay. And the reason behind that is I don't feel that I'm the expert in completely understanding Facebook ads. Okay. And I don't want someone to waste their money. Okay. But for other things, then we'll walk through, depending upon the concept, and I'll help them figure out what we need to do for that next step. But a lot of times, especially with Facebook ads, it's making the recommendations on where they need to seek additional resources.
Okay. So one of the things I like on your site is that you've been featured in multiple places. You already mentioned not the museum.
National Archives Museum.
Thank you, the National Archives Museum. But also you've been featured on Creative Live, NPR, The Washington Post, etc. One of the big things that a lot of sellers and creative business owners crave is getting media attention. Is that something that you're able to help with? And how were you able to get the media attention that you've garnered?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, I will help with that. And a lot of it is, just being frank, right place, right time. And some of it is, I do a lot of markets, and being in our area, it's making the connections with the individuals that are there at the market and walking around that are potential customers. And that's how I met a reporter for the Washington Post.
Okay.
Same with NPR. They're headquartered here in Washington, D.C., and I was able to make a connection there to actually participate in one of their events. So it's making those connections that really benefited me. And I'm definitely, I connect people all the time. That's what I like doing.
Okay. How easy would you say it is for most Etsy sellers, or the typical Etsy seller, to transition from being online? Because Etsy is all online, but obviously in your business, you took it off. You started offline.
I did.
Yes. And I think now in today's world with everything, well, not everything, but with so much happening on the internet and online, a lot of us kind of cut out the physical world, in that, we don't maybe put in as much effort to show up in person to places. How easy and what part of or how important is it to growing our creative businesses do you think it is for us to show up physically in different places?
I think it's instrumental, especially for those that carry the physical products, soap, letterpress cards, scarves, hand-dyed scarves. I'm working with someone on those right now. I think it's just imperative, from even cultivating your local presence to getting wholesale accounts in local stores to making those one-off connections. You never know when you're going to meet someone who is in charge of the local television station, and you just can't pay for that type of coverage when they want to bring you on to do a segment. And there is an investment with doing markets, and you do have to figure out the best ones for your product.
Yes.
But that's how I was able to grow so quickly. Okay.
And navigating the world of physical markets, meaning craft fairs, vendor shows, farmers markets, you're able to help people figure out which ones are best, because I know not every particular in-person market or show is ideal for every type of seller.
Exactly. And I love helping people find the ones that are really going to provide their ideal customers, so they have those very successful sales days. And like you said, there are certain ones that I can just tell by the way the marketing's done. Just don't waste your time applying. Do not go there. Your customer's not going to be there. But there are other ones where if you show up, you're going to be having lobster for dinner because you're just so excited.
Oh, good. Okay, so you know how to figure these all out.
Yes, very much so.
So there's a resource I saw at a bookstore. I was at Barnes and Noble, and it's, what was it called? I think it's called the Handmade Sellers Craft Market thing. Anyway, it's a big, thick book of all the craft markets, trade shows, vendor fairs, but for handmade sellers. Have you ever seen that before? I wish I could remember the exact name of the book.
No, but I'm going to have to go to Barnes and Nobles today. I usually use Google and word of mouth, other friends at events. for instance, someone else I work with, she actually posted, I'm looking for high quality events in the South during the wintertime. Everyone tell me what they've gone to. And I'm like, oh, I need to start saving these because the South during the wintertime sounds phenomenal.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's so they have this, and I can't remember. I can see the cover in my head, and I'm trying to read the publisher, but I can't see it right now. But it's the same as these books, the company that puts out the Writer's Market Handbook, where if you're a writer and you want to send your work to different publishers, it's a compendium of all different publishers in all different genres. And so you can just look through it, and it has all their contact information, who to reach out to, and whatnot. And so it's the exact same thing, but for handmade sellers.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'll search for it and then put a link to it, just so anyone else who's interested. But I was going to ask if such a resource would be helpful, or if you had any experience with that. So, and I only saw one copy, so I don't even know how popular the book is, because these things change from year to year.
Yeah, they do change from year to year, and I always recommend that people walk the event first if they can, the year prior, just so they can see how crowded it is, how many people actually have shopping bags in their hands and things like that, just to really get a feel for the actual event itself. And I know it's not always possible if the craft show you're going to go to is 6 hours away. Yeah. It's not always feasible to make that drive. But I've used online forums before, and ones that you still have to pay to get into. And I don't do that anymore. I find just really talking to folks has been my biggest source of information, and just getting to know other people. But for those that are new in this space, it's really just Googling, looking at photos, and maybe trying one market a year and one each quarter if you really are adventurous, and going from there. There are some standards like Renegade. DC has a show called Crafty Bastards that people come into for all over the United States. It's also in Memphis, Tennessee now, or Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
I think it's Nashville. But there's some big ones like those that you're going to have a huge success at if you just go to.
Yes. And you just answered another question I was going to ask, which was, how far is too far to go for a show? But when you're talking about something like, say, the Renegade Craft Fair, I think it doesn't matter where you're coming from in the country. If you want to attend that, I guess wherever you are, if it's worth it for you, then you make it happen.
Exactly. So I did Renegade in New York, and it was an investment. I think the hotel was $400 a night, and parking's astronomical in New York City. So you have to make sure that your pricing's correct, that the attendance is going to be there, and that you have enough product to sell to make all of that back.
Okay.
So when you make those big investments, I guess I'm lucky here in the DC area that we do have several that are quite large shows. So the travel isn't quite the number that it could be for a lot of those events. Yeah.
Okay. So switching gears a bit, let's talk about running a business. So you run your own handmade soap company, and somebody else listening here is running their own handmade business. How do you handle your day-to-day activities? How do you manage your time as a business owner? And not just having a physical product, but also running a service business as well.
So I also have a toddler that stays at home with us. So just to complicate matters a little bit more.
Yes.
My husband and I both work from home. So we tag team the toddler throughout the day. And luckily he's still on a 2-nap-a-day schedule, and school starts in the fall. So that's going to give me a little bit more time once school starts. But for the most part in the morning, I get up when the toddler does, which is between 7 and 9 in the morning. So I'm not an early riser at all. And I typically spend the first part of the day, it's either on the computer, marketing, running business numbers, things like that. anything that can be done at my desk while the toddler is up and awake and needs just a little bit of attention. And that it can be shipping, because I've brought everything from my studio in the basement upstairs to having coaching calls. So it just really depends on what needs to get done that day. And then once he goes to sleep and after I've gone to the gym, I'll head downstairs into my soap studio. And that's when I will have my TV on in the background. So I get a little mind-numbing TV and have a chance to craft and make. So my days are a little bit longer, but I try to divvy it up between when the toddler's awake and when he's asleep, basically.
Okay. And do you have any particular tools or resources that you find are very helpful to you in running your business, either both or one in particular?
I actually love these. I got them on Paper Source. They're these giant calendars, and I have a quarter of the year at a time taped onto my office wall. And I use Post-it notes.
Yes.
And I essentially lay out 3 months worth of marketing for both my businesses, when I'm traveling, child's doctor's appointments, my doctor's appointments, and all sorts of stuff on the calendar. And the reason I do it on Post-it notes is because that way it's flexible. If I need to change something, I can.
Yes.
I also put my goals on these. So they have a notes section on the right-hand side, and I keep my subscriber goals for my newsletters, my coaching client goals, my sales goals, all sorts of stuff. They're outlined in check boxes and they're broken down that way so I can check it off. And it just really helps me stay organized that way. I know a lot of people will use like Asana, Trello, and other online tools, but for me, it's the paper calendar up on the wall.
Yeah. I'm a very tactile person too. I'm right with you on that. I've tried Trello. It's well laid out, but I just could not remember to, go online and look at my board and see what I had to do. But I use a board too. I use paper as well. If I write something down, I can always carry it with me, and I do the Post-it notes too. I have Post-it notes everywhere, and I like being able to scrunch them up and throw them away when I'm done, because then I feel like I've done it. It's over.
It's as gratifying as checking the box off on the to-do list.
Yes. And if I have a written list, I like to cross stuff off, but I like when I can actually just throw that piece of paper away and know it's all done.
And I find when I write it down, I remember it more, and I feel more committed to it as well. So I that's just how my brain works.
Yes. For me, I use the digital stuff. Like I'll set reminders in my phone. Like if I know I might forget something and I want that physical reminder where, the alarm goes off, or, it pops up on my phone and says, do this now. That's where I use technology. But other than that, I write down, paper, pen, pencil, markers. That's me.
Yeah, I'll take inventory on my phone of what I have in my market baskets and things like that, my totes. So I know what I need to replenish, and it's called Wunderlist, and it is a paid app.
Okay.
But that's where I will say, okay, I need more of this soap, this soap, this soap. I need more of this product. I'm running low on shopping bags. So I have those that I can easily carry around with me as I'm like just acquiring all the supplies I need again to refill the totes.
Yeah.
But that's my only really digital
that's a good
product
one.
that I use.
Is it Wonder, WONDER, or WANDER?
It is actually with U as in unicorn.
Oh, glad I asked. Wonder. None of the above.
Yeah, I believe it was acquired by Microsoft a few years ago. It was an indie app, and my husband was using it as a to-do list, and I took advantage of having it.
Okay. All right. So I'll hunt that down, and I'll put a link to it for anyone else who thinks they might find that useful. So you talked about goal setting. How strictly do you hold yourself to meeting your goals. And if you don't accomplish them on, when you expect to, how do you work around that? Because sometimes things happen and you just can't do what you need to do.
It's difficult. That's actually something I've really been working on, even personally. And it's a mental hurdle for me. Mm. And what I really encourage people is set yourself up for your goal you can achieve, and then your stretch goal. Mm. So as long as you hit your basic goal, you've accomplished what you set out to do. If you hit your stretch goal, even better. Mm. But try to set yourself up for success that way. Okay. Mentally, I try to just shake it off. And for instance, in January, I didn't hit the subscriber numbers I wanted to. That's okay. We're going to reevaluate the strategy and try something different in February. And if it doesn't work in February, then we'll try something different then. But that's just, you have to take that positive attitude with it and just accept it and keep moving forward and keep pushing yourself to move forward and not quit.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. And I ask that because I know how I feel when I decide, okay, I want to do this, and, and I don't hit that. And I think that's a common thread that we all share running a business is sometimes there just aren't enough hours in the day and we don't accomplish everything we want to. So I think it's just nice to hear that other people have the same struggles too, and just work with it, being human.
Exactly. And that's just it. I'm thinking of different markets, and I had a sales number in mind, and my attitude wasn't there for the day. I realized that I was in a funk, and I can blame the weather. I can blame all this other stuff, but I really just have to accept it and just keep moving forward and know that it's going to change.
Yeah. Yes. So let's talk about promoting one's business. Most sellers, especially on Etsy, and recently Etsy has released this new social media tool. I think that's what they call it, something like that. So what part would you say social media does and should play in growing a creative business for someone who sells on Etsy? And do you recommend any specific platforms that sellers should focus on?
Definitely. I was actually just having a conversation about this yesterday with somebody. And for businesses, I think social media, especially Instagram and Pinterest, are phenomenal. Mm. You have a chance to connect on a one-to-many basis, essentially, with your customers or potential customers. And I have found that people like my products, but it's really the connection with me that drives the sales. Yeah. And being able to connect with those individuals over the course of many days, months, and years keeps them coming back. So whether it's a picture of my dog, because I'm a crazy dog lady, that allows them to see, oh, that's why she created that product, because I made a dog shampoo. They get to see the behind the scenes of me using it on my dog, or the connection with my child that they saw because I brought him for the first 6 months of his life to the farmer's market. It's those personal connections that you don't have with somebody like the CEO of Target or the CEO of Home Goods or even their employees. And it's really what I believe pushes the small business community and the handmade community in particular forward. People see what they're really investing in, and that gives me warm fuzzies. I'm getting goosebumps now.
Now, so you said specifically Instagram and Pinterest, and I assume that's because it's easy to connect with. Well, I shouldn't say Pinterest because I don't really know how to use Pinterest that well. But Instagram, I know it's very easy to connect and to communicate, and they're very visual. did you learn on your own how to use those platforms, or do you have any resources you can recommend for someone who is trying to learn how to navigate in the ever-changing world of algorithms on these platforms?
Mm-hmm. Oh, algorithms. Yes, I am learning on my own as I go, and I'm actually looking for someone to help me in Pinterest. Just being upfront,
Yeah.
Pinterest is a new endeavor for me, even as a business coach. So it's one of those platforms that I really want to grow in this year. For Instagram, I really like Gary Vanderchuck, or Gary V, as most people call him.
Okay.
I started following him when he was on Jay Leno's show. That tells you how long ago this was. When he was just the wine guy, and he would pair his parents' wine that they purchased for their company to different products. I remember him eating dirt on the Today Show, or the late night show. And now he has this whole big social media company that teaches individuals how to use Instagram and to harness other social media platforms.
Really?
So yes, he is huge. He has this personality. He's blunt. I think I connect with his bluntness a lot. And he just says, go for it. You're you. No one else can be you. Just do it. And I love that about him. But he also gives you practical tips, like how many hashtags to use, when you should be posting, what things you should be posting, and just really learning how to be you.
Yeah.
And so I like him. You can follow him in all the different platforms, and you technically don't have to pay for his stuff, but he gives great advice and great tips just in his everyday posts.
Okay. So is he just all over on social media, posting everywhere? So one can just
Everywhere.
find him on Instagram or
YouTube, Facebook,
oh, okay.
anywhere.
Okay. So I know I've heard his name. I've not really watched or listened or followed him, so I don't know. I know the name though. So I will hunt him down everywhere I can find him and put links to everywhere you can find him. So if you're interested, then you can follow him on whichever platform is most comfortable for you. Okay, so for creative business owners and someone selling on Etsy, what part I know social media is an important part, but how about things like blogging and just doing something outside of the Etsy platform that can help grow and expand their business? Would you recommend, say, something like blogging or running one's own e-commerce website in addition to Etsy, or would you recommend both? And that's a huge undertaking to even say do both. But how would you direct a seller?
100% think that they should own their URL for their company name and your own personal name.
Oh,
I think it's just imperative for you. You never know the direction that you're going to take later, whether that's, let's say you crochet and you decide that you want to make patterns, but you can put them all under the LLC under your name, and then have divisions as your company so you can grow. And that can be multiple Etsy shops or your own e-commerce site. Okay. So I really encourage anyone and everyone to own their own name, URL. I mean, you're talking, it's a small investment, even if you don't stand a website up there. $8, $12, $15 a year. It's not that expensive.
Okay.
And then your own site URL, because even if you want to stay on Etsy, you can still send people to yoururl.com, which just redirects to your Etsy site.
Okay.
And that's because I look at it from the perspective of, I know Etsy's been around for a long time, and it's a for-profit company now. But what happens if it's not here in 2 years? And all your traffic is going to the subdomain on Etsy? You've lost your sales platform. But if you at least have yourstore.com and you're redirecting to Etsy, you can still stand up your own site pretty quickly and not lose that traffic.
Yeah, that's true.
So think of it as an insurance policy to have your own URL. Now, from your standalone e-commerce site, I honestly, being frank with you, I prefer that myself. it's easier to collect data on who your customers are, the Google Analytics, the pop-ups that you can do for newsletter subscriptions and things like that.
Okay.
So I do prefer the standalone site. I have Old Town Suds on Shopify, and that has worked extremely well for me selling online and in person, because that's what I use to process my credit card payments.
Okay.
And run my inventory and things like that. From a hosting both perspective, that's a lot of work.
Yes.
So I would, for those not really wanting to take that investment into, let's say, a Shopify account, then stand up what you said, blogging. Blogging is a great way to get increased traffic and to create content for all your other social media platforms and your newsletter that you're sending out. You don't have to be creating different content for every platform. You can repurpose it all. And so it really helps as you're doing SEO and branding and just creating that know, like, and trust that customers need to purchase from you. And I read blogs on a daily basis. So I do not think it's dead. I think it's great and an easy, small investment that makers can utilize for their branding and marketing purposes.
Okay. Thank you. And so you have your own Shopify store. If someone wants to set one up at some point, is that something as part of your coaching that you can help them with?
100%.
Fantastic. So what do you think are some of the most common mistakes that you see, in particular, sellers on Etsy making, or either with their Etsy shops or just in general with their creative businesses?
I think this is creative business in general for what I'm going to say.
Okay.
But they stand up a website or their Etsy shop and they assume everyone's just going to find them. It drives me. I will hold on to my computer, my laptop, and just scream as soon as I see the post. Don't I have any traffic? I'm like, oh God, here we go again. It's the same every time.
Yeah.
And you have to learn how to market yourself and your business. And I can guarantee on your Facebook list, on your friends list, you have several hundred people. All those people need to know that you just opened up your shop or that your shop is promoting something. All of those people need to be on your email list. Another issue is people don't know what to send on their newsletter, or don't know what they should be sending in their newsletters, that they should be doing a newsletter and things like that. It's all marketing.
Yeah.
And a majority of owning your business is really marketing, so you have those sales.
I'm one of those people who, with my newsletter, I don't know what to do. I mean, every once in a while I'll say, oh, okay, I have something to say, but then I'm not consistent with it, which I know is probably not going to be, but it's not great when you have a list of people who have said, I want to hear from you, and then you don't communicate with them. Is it easy to recover from that? Is it even possible to recover from that?
It is. And I've done it with both companies.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell you, I've stopped email for my coaching and my soap company at multiple points. And then, Steph, come on, you got to do what you're teaching. Let's do this. And I just start emailing again. It's hey, you haven't heard from me a while, but here's what we're going to start talking about.
Yeah.
The goal that I set my coaching clients up for is start with once a week and eventually move it up to twice a week.
Ooh, twice a week.
Twice a week. And a lot of people are very scared about that.
I know. You don't want to annoy people.
But how many Target emails do you have in your inbox right now?
Too many.
How many do you have from Walmart? How many do you have from Macy's?
Yes.
They're sending once to twice a day.
Yeah.
So don't be like the big box stores, but have some content and one traditional that they can always count as going to be a sales piece per week. So for my soap company that's on the drying rack, what I've either made that week or is coming off the drying rack for sale at this point in time. So they know what to expect and they know that they can look out to be able to purchase that.
Okay.
From a content perspective, that's the first newsletter I send out in the week. And that is either a random story that happened to me. For instance, I went grocery shopping after a gym class. So I was all sweaty, disgusting. I knew I smelled. It was a spin class. I looked horrible. And I had about $50 worth of groceries in my cart at the checkout lane, already rung up, and I did not have my wallet.
Oh, no.
And what I went through, but I still had Apple Pay on my phone, but the checkout person said they wouldn't take Apple Pay, which I found out later they did. So I told them about the embarrassing story and how what they could have done to save that sale, which is just have a little contactless reader, and they could have taken Apple Pay, and I would have walked out with $50 worth of groceries.
Yeah.
Instead, what happened was I was embarrassed, and I sent my husband back to the store to get the groceries.
Okay, so it doesn't always have to be all work, business stuff.
Exactly. I still try to relate it back, essentially with the reader at that point. But sometimes I'll send an email where it's International Women's Day or it is International IPA Day, and I celebrate that, but still relating it back to my business in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be this long endeavor either. We're talking 150 to 250 words. That's
okay.
a long tweet at this point in time.
Yes.
So it's not a lot.
Okay. And that doesn't sound intimidating. It's just the thought of, okay, I have to sit down and I have to do a newsletter and I have to send it to everyone and I have to do it now. And I'm like, okay, maybe not.
The other tip I have is batching things. So, you get worked up about the newsletter. So let's sit down for 20 minutes one day and come up with a list of 12 topics that we think our readers could be interested in. And that could be anything from markets that I'll be doing later in the year or that are coming up, to Easter, to Mother's Day, how to pair your beer with Girl Scout cookies, because Girl Scout cookies are being sold right now, and then how you can continue that on to beer soap. Like, it doesn't have to be this super strict, super business regimented email.
Okay.
And so sit down, come up with a list of 12 topics.
Okay.
And then break those 12 topics, like say your top 2, into subtopics that you can kind of talk about. So that main topic in that first brainstorm is your overarching theme for the month. And then you use those subtopics to kind of guide the other 4 weeks.
Okay. And so then you can write up everything in one sitting.
In one sitting.
And schedule them. Okay.
And not think about it again until the next time you have to do it. Okay.
And then what if something impromptu happens and you want to share that, like something in the moment? Let's say there's, for me, let's say, okay, the CEO of Etsy is having another Q&A and I want to make sure people know about it, or, that they show up or they get to send their questions in. And I've already sent 2 emails that week. Now what?
Then I will either send another email that week, or if that second email hasn't gone out, I'll just replace it with the breaking news email. So you have to use your best judgment. But for instance, if the Etsy CEO is doing a Q&A and it was just announced and it's tomorrow, send that blast.
Okay. All right. So maybe it's not so hard. When you break it down.
Yeah, once you get used to it and you break it down and you do it all at once, it's such a relief.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have your marketing out there and done, and you don't have to worry about it. It's just, it makes it so much easier on us.
Okay.
It's one less thing you have to focus on.
Yes. And for anyone who does not yet have a mailing list, you need to get a mailing list. I know I've not been the most, what's the word? I don't want to say responsible, but I haven't been the best steward of my mailing list. But it's important that you have a way to stay in touch with people who want to stay in touch with you. And so for that, I use Mad Mimi as my mail service provider. But Steffanie, what do you recommend?
For those just starting out, I typically guide them towards MailChimp because it is easy drag and drop. for 90% of what you need to do. And up to a certain amount of subscribers, it's free as long as you include their logo. Okay. So that's where I typically guide people to it first. And then once they're more developed into their e-commerce, their Etsy site, they have the cash flow coming in, I typically move them to something like ConvertKit or another Mad Mimi, Emma, where they just have more robust features. Okay.
All right. And now you can actually start to collect newsletter subscribers through Etsy. So there's no reason not to.
Exactly. Emails are gold.
Yes.
That's just how you have to look at it. Even if you're scared of doing and sending a newsletter now, whatever you do, get the email addresses. If you're at a market, I have forms on my in my Facebook group that people can download and just print them off. That's all you have to do. Just put it out there with a clipboard and a pen, and just if people aren't, even if they do buy, but if they're not ready to buy now, tell them to sign up for your newsletter, and then they'll get reminders and some tips and tricks in their email. You're not a spammer. Yeah. You just want to stay connected to them.
Yes. Okay.
It's so easy. It's just people don't do it. You got to do it.
Yes, I know. Now, speaking about staying connected and communicating with people, you have a maker society on Facebook, the Handmade Business Coach Society. What's that about? What can people expect if they join that group?
Mm-hmm. So we have a really active group of makers in all different stages of their businesses. Some are just starting out, some are more seasoned in their endeavors. We do a lot of free trainings, a lot of helping each other out, and a lot of connecting. So we'll have group Pinterest boards. We do have one. People will share their stores, their fan pages, just so we can like and help promote each other. It's more of like the rising tide lifts all boats. And that is what we're really trying to do within the society.
Okay. And to join, is it just as easy as going to Facebook and clicking join?
It is. There are 2 questions just to make sure you are a member and that you have your own business. And that's it.
Okay. And if someone, I will link to the Facebook group in the notes for this episode, but if someone is listening right now and they want to look you up, how do they find you on Facebook? I'll find the group rather.
Search for the Successful Makers Society, or there's a direct link on the homepage of my website or on Instagram. It's all over. Okay. So any of those will connect you over to the society.
Okay. All right. So I'll link to that. But again, on Facebook, it's the Successful Makers Society.
Yes. Right. Or another way is to go to the Handmade Business Coach Facebook page, and that'll connect you over as well.
Okay. All right. Good deal. So Steffanie, now you offer, in addition to coaching, if someone, say, isn't really ready yet to work with you one-on-one, you have some other services that you provide, like you can do a shop critique and you have a mini intensive. Can we talk about what those are and what people can expect within those products to get?
Yeah, definitely. So the shop critique is pretty much what it sounds like. There's different levels of the critique, and some do include some coaching, and so they have a chance to ask a lot of questions. Oh, okay. But it's just going through, and I will identify the areas that just need a little bit of help or some sprucing up or things that confused me. I even do this for my own website. I try to do it quarterly just to have somebody else review it, because you never know when you miss the description that just doesn't quite make sense, the photo that's not representing your product the way it should, or a broken link, because I've had all 3 of those personally. And I just find that we as makers are just so attached to everything that it's very hard for us to put on that constructive hat and really look at our own materials in that light. And it's just, you never know what I'm going to find. And so those, the shop critiques come in different levels, depending upon what the individual is really looking for. The mini intensive, which if anyone uses the discount code ConvoMe, is 15% off for the listeners of the podcast. And that is coaching with me. We can go into whatever it is that you're really struggling with, what you're looking for. And if someone isn't really certain if coaching is right for them or what they can really get out of it, how much progress they can make, the mini intensive is a good first step. It's a lower cost investment. Plus, with the discount code, it's 15% off as well. Okay. So it's one of those dip your feet in, see what happens, and see if we're a good fit.
Great. First of all, thank you so much for giving 15% off. I appreciate that for the listeners and for just giving people that discount to be able to see if this is something that will work for them, and then maybe working with you on a longer term basis.
Yeah, me too. I like rewarding people who pay attention and people who listen and help each other out. So I like discount codes. Okay.
So I will have links to Stephanie's products, the shop review and critique, as well as the mini intensive. And I'm looking at your storefront right now. I see you also have a maker's workshop live. What's that?
It was actually done last week. So talk about someone who needs a review of her own website. But there will be a recording posted here later as an evergreen product, so someone that they can watch the replay and still get the workbook that comes with that. But it was a workshop we actually did on newsletters and exactly what you need to put into your newsletter, exactly how to create those subject lines and the content that your readers want to have in their inbox.
Okay. Wow. Sounds useful.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It ran a lot longer than I ever expected it to.
Nice. Okay, we'll keep an eye out for that. Steffanie, do you have any specific closing tips or advice for that Etsy seller who's listening and looking for just how to grow as a creative business owner this year and on into the future, not just for this year, but being close to the beginning of the year is a nice time to plan ahead? What would you tell that person?
I would say don't be afraid of investing in yourself and your business. And not just from a coaching perspective, but from a product packaging, from a shipping perspective, from a website design perspective, if you move in that direction. Yeah. A lot of my up-leveling and my growth occurred when I invested in those materials. From my biggest one was actually product packaging, just to be able to take it to that next level and charge that higher price. Okay. So don't be afraid of the numbers. If you're trending in that direction, take advantage of it and continue on your growth.
Okay. I like that. Yes. And it took me a while to get to a point where I believed that investing in my business and myself was going to actually help me grow. Because, you have to make a mental shift in thinking that, well, why am I going to spend this money because I'm trying to make money? But sometimes that's what you need to do. And it pays off, in larger dividends than if you didn't. I hope that makes sense to someone listening.
Yeah, I can think of a prime example. I had a very large wholesale order and I spent it all, over $1,000, on a machine to label lip balms. But it cut down on my time. So I was able to label 5,000 lip balms in minutes versus days.
Oh, wow.
So it's saving me money in the long run. But yes, it's such a large investment. You're so nervous and you get the butterflies in your stomach and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. But it paid for itself.
Yes.
Time and time again.
Yeah, that's a great example. Steffanie, what's the best way people can reach you if they want to get in touch and if they have more questions for you, perhaps about something we haven't touched on yet?
Definitely. My email address is Steffanie@SteffanieHousman.com. So if you have a question, email is a great way to go. But also my website is SteffanieHousman.com as well. Okay. I'm also on Instagram as the Handmade Biz Coach. And I should probably mention Steffanie is spelled with 2 F's as in Frank instead of a PH.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. It's 2 F's, not a PH. But yes. I will have your email in the notes for this episode, as well as links to your website and to your Instagram account. So if anyone wants to just hop over there and just click over and get in touch with Steffanie, you can easily do that. But again, it's Steffanie, Steffanie, and Housman is Housman.
That's correct.
Steffanie, thank you so much for being my guest and for sharing all that you have, and just what you do and how you help Etsy sellers. Thank you also for sharing your experience with us. I've learned from you. I'm going to step up my newsletter game for one, but I know that others have been able to learn some good information from you, and I thank you for taking the time out to have this conversation with me.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this call and conversation.
And I thank you for listening to the podcast. I will be back next week.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.